And welcome back, everyone, to St. Anselm College in New Hampshire. We're here with Democratic presidential candidate Andrew Yang for a live town hall. So back to the questions, of which I get the first one. You and Dave Chappelle, buddies, right? Comedian Dave Chappelle recently endorsed you. He is now performing comedy shows for you in South Carolina. You recently posted a video introducing yourselves as Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker's Rush Hour, right?
Yes.
Why do you think you guys made a connection?
Well, Dave sees what's going on in our country and knows that we need to do better for our families and our communities. He actually texted me right before I came on stage. He's excited about trying to pull the country together, and I'm thrilled that he's part of the Yanggang. He may be one of the coolest members of the Yanggang, which is very high praise because there are a lot of cool members, including my wife.
You just name drop. I just texted Dave Chappelle.
Yeah. He's been like one of my favorite entertainers for years. So getting to know some of these people and realizing they're even better in person as human beings than they are entertainers is a real privilege.
Yeah. And you think it helps with someone like him?
Well, you have thousands of people show up and then have him sing your praises. I mean, that can only help, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They say people often learn through comedy, right? The truth is often spoken in jest. People learn things through comedy. It's easy. It's more palatable. It goes down easier, right, when someone's not preaching to you.
I mean, if you look at people like Trevor Noah and Jon Stewart and John Oliver, I think that comedians are some of our foremost thinkers and educators at this point. And that may or may not be the best thing for the country, but here we are. It's 2020. You have to, you have to use what you have out there in terms of reason and humanity.
All right, cool. Let's bring in the audience back in. Emma Goulet is here. She's a student at St. Anselm College, and she is still undecided as well. Hi, Emma.
Thank you, and welcome to St. Anselm.
One of you should just pretend to be for me.
So sorry.
Kidding. Totally fine. That's my job, is to take you from undecided to actually supporting me. So, Emma, I'm just kidding.
Well, maybe. So voters today are faced with the difficult challenge of discerning truth from political spin. And making matters worse, social media has brought new opportunities to target individuals with carefully crafted messages designed by social scientists to sway their opinion. So what actions would your administration take to ensure that the citizens have access to accurate information about their government in order to make informed decisions?
Thank you for this question, Emma. It's crucial. One thing I would do immediately is hold Facebook to the same standard as cable news networks, where they have to actually verify the truth of a political ad on their network. And to me, it's unfathomable that they don't realize that they are the largest disseminator of information to the American people, and they have many times the resources of any other media organization. The fact that they don't take responsibility for the truth of political ads on their network is beyond me. That would be a very, very big step forward. Another thing I would invest in right now, and this is really important for rural communities and places in New Hampshire, is we need to rebuild local journalism in this country. Because right now, almost 2,000 local papers have gone out of business over the last number of years because all of their advertising revenue went up to the cloud, and you can't run a newspaper on that. 200 counties in this country don't have any local news source at all. It's very, very hard to have a functioning democracy if you don't have any local news. So we have to rebuild local news, and it turns out Americans actually trust local news more than they trust the big national media organizations. No offense, Don. No offense, CNN. But that's, that's just the numbers.
Yeah, but I want to know how you're going to do that, especially when it comes to social media. We have a very robust First Amendment, and often the companies will say we believe in First Amendment. People on our platform should be able to say whatever they want, and they, for lack of a better term, hide behind the First Amendment, or they use the First Amendment as a defense to allow people to be able to say whatever they want on their platform.
To me, it's such a cop-out, Don. And CNN, which is a network with much lower levels of resource than Facebook, has taken the responsibility and said you can't have a false political ad on our network. So Facebook can solve this problem, and I'm just going to tell it like it is. Do we think that they would be taking this stance if they would make more money by actually double-checking the truth of these ads as opposed to right now just accepting them? I mean, right now they're saying can't do it, in part because it serves their financial interest to take these ads. You know, if they were going to make more money by actually vetting these ads, they would say, yeah, we can do it tomorrow. So we need to make Facebook own up to its responsibility as a mature company and get away from this total cop-out that they're like, we're not a publisher, we're a platform. Are you kidding me? You're the biggest publisher in the world today, and you need to start acting like it. You need to start acting like a grown-up company.
Does that go for Facebook and Twitter? For all social media, yes?
Yes, it does. And Twitter actually already said they weren't going to do it.
So if Mark Zuckerberg or someone, whoever that runs Twitter, is a Dorsett, if they're watching, especially Mark Zuckerberg, what do you say to him right now?
Say, Mark, your company is contributing to the disintegration of our democracy. If you're an American and a patriot and you care about the country your kids will inherit, then you need to have Facebook step up and say there will not be untrue political ads on your platform.
You said you're going to make them. You said you're going to make them. What do you mean by make, Mr. Yang?
Well, my first preference is to sit down with a major organization like Facebook and say, hey, do the right thing. But if they don't want to do the right thing, then we have a legislature for a reason. We should just pass a law saying Facebook should not have verifiably false political advertisements on their platform. And if they do, then they should pay a penalty accordingly.
All right. Back to the audience. James Beaudry, he is on the board of St. Anselm College Democrats, and he says currently he is supporting Mayor Pete Buttigieg.
This will be an ongoing joke for the rest of the town hall.
So my question is, teen suicide is on the rise in the United States. What would you do to make sure that teens and young adults get the mental health care that they need to prevent these tragedies?
Thank you for this question. I am so passionate about addressing the mental health crisis in our country. My brother's a clinical psychology professor, so I know that we can do much, much more for people who are struggling. We need to invest in counseling and therapists at the high school level at a minimum, make it so that if you do have struggles, you have a resource you can go to. I'm going to tie back in technology to this phenomenon because the mental health crisis we're seeing among young people right now, anxiety, depression, antisocial impulses, spiked when we got smartphones and social media apps into teenagers' hands. And I was a very awkward, introverted 12-year-old kid. Not that you can tell now, I don't know. But when I was 12 years old, if I went home and closed the door, I felt like I was alone. Today, if you're 12, you close the door, you feel like your classmates are still in the room with you because you can take out your phone and see what they're talking about and saying at every moment. You know who doesn't let their kids use these social media apps and smartphones? The folks in Silicon Valley who made millions of dollars off of them. If you ever want to go to a screen-free environment, go to Silicon Valley. You will find there are no screens in sight for kids below a certain age. So if we want to address the mental health crisis in our young people, we need to get therapists in place and counselors. We need to destigmatize these struggles at the highest level. I would have a psychologist in the White House. I thought that was a good idea even before the current administration. But it just sends a very clear message that we all struggle and that it'll encourage people to step forward. We also do need to get into the guts of these social media apps and let these companies know that the mental health of our kids are more important than their profits.
Yeah. Listen, another issue that affecting mental health for many Americans, substance abuse. You not only want to legalize marijuana, but you also want to decriminalize small amounts of opioids like heroin and fentanyl. I mean, even Senator Bernie Sanders has made it clear, and I quote here, he says, marijuana is not the same as heroin. What do you say to voters who think that this is a bridge too far?
Well, it was a high school student who told me that his classmates have fentanyl patches on their shoulders and they're already addicted. They'll never seek help because it's an illegal substance. So he said, what are we going to do for them? And the fact is this epidemic, this opiate plague that has been tearing apart your communities here in New Hampshire for years, is a plague that our government facilitated, essentially. Purdue Pharma dispensed millions of OxyContin prescriptions, marketing as a non-addictive wonder drug, to the point where there were more opiate prescriptions in the state of Ohio than there were human beings in the state of Ohio at one point. And our government signed off on that and said that's okay. And we're still struggling with the impact to this day. So the question is, how are you going to help your people actually get better and stronger and get off of these drugs? First, you have to get back all the blood money from Purdue Pharma and the other drug companies, take all the billions of dollars away and say this is going to be a down payment on treatment for our people to help them get stronger and better. But the second thing you have to do is you have to say to our people, look, this is not an individual failing. This is a plague that our government essentially helped happen. It's a plague of hyper-capitalism run amok. And if we catch you struggling with drugs, we are going to refer you to counseling and treatment and not to a prison cell. This is what other countries have done. It has reduced substance abuse rates and overdose rates. And this is what we should do in the United States of America. I think Bernie's wrong on this.
So when people hear decriminalize, I would think that they think legalize. That's not what you mean. There's a difference between decriminalizing and legalizing a substance. You don't want to legalize heroin. You don't want to legalize fentanyl, right? So explain the difference. What do you mean?
What you do is you say to your police departments, essentially, we should stop prosecuting this crime if someone's an addict and has drugs below a certain level. If they're a dealer, if they're profiting, they go straight to jail. But if they're struggling with addiction, they should not be heading to jail. They should be heading to counseling and treatment. And we should have safe injection sites so that if someone actually is trying to recover, they have someplace they can go. It was here in New Hampshire where an EMT told me that he saved someone from overdosing 1 week, and then what's he doing the following week? Saving the same person in the same place over and over again. And then one time he gets there and it's too late and that person's dead. And it was literally the 4th or 5th time that he had to save that individual in that apartment. And he said to me in an impassioned way, we need someplace for that person to go after I save them so I don't have to try and save them again the following week.
But you know it doesn't just affect that individual. It affects the entire family. So what do you do for families who are suffering from addiction? Not just them personally, but maybe it's a family member who's doing it.
And that's exactly right, Don, because these are not isolated problems. They're destroying families, they're destroying communities. There's nothing we can do to give people their children, their loved ones back, but we can give them a real path forward where if your loved one is struggling with addiction, imagine a world where you could refer them to treatment and there was not a fear that they were going to get thrown in jail, that there was an actual place they could go physically that has treatment resources available to them, that they don't have to come home or go home alone where you're worried about them. What are they going to do when they're alone? You can say, look, don't be alone. Go to this place where someone will actually look after you and make sure that you don't overdose.
But if I can just follow quickly, because what I'm trying to get at is, if you want to take the stigma away, you have to involve the family, because many times in the family's embarrassed by it.
Yeah.
Or they even think that there's a stigma to it. So I'm asking you, what do you do for the family of an individual to try to help with that?
Don, when I talk to family members of people who've been struggling with opiate addiction, their first and foremost concern is not the stigma. Their first and foremost concern is whether their loved one's actually going to get well, get treatment, and not overdose. Mm-hmm. So if your relative, your brother, your son is struggling, you would be thrilled just to have some place to go with them. You're more concerned about their life and safety than you are what the neighbors might think.
Thank you for answering that. Jane Vance is standing right there. She's a retired teacher from New London, New Hampshire, and she says she is undecided. Jane?
Hi.
This will be an ongoing fun thing. Hey, Jane.
Gun violence has reached epidemic proportions. Each time another horrific shooting occurs, politicians offer their prayers and thoughts, but do absolutely nothing concrete to stop another tragic shooting from occurring. If Republicans retain control of the Senate, how do you plan on getting common sense gun legislation passed?
Well, thank you for all you've done for our children over the years, Jane. I've got 2 kids, one in public school, the other one is autistic and in a special needs school, so appreciate everything you've done.
Thank you.
My younger son's school had active shooter drills a number of weeks ago, and he's 4 years old. And I looked at the studies I could find and tried to find studies that said that active shooter drills make our kids safer, and I could not find any evidence that they do. I then tried to find evidence that the shooter drills make our kids anxious, concerned, stressed out, and confused, and I found a whole stack. So we should be making these active shooter drills optional for families and communities and not requiring them at the government level. If the parents want them, great, but if parents don't want to send our kids the message that they have to be in fear of their classmates and that their life could be in danger at any moment, then I think that should be the parents and the community's choice. That said, how do we actually get the common sense gun safety laws that the vast majority of Americans agree on passed? And right now the problem is that the NRA has a stranglehold on a certain number of legislators who feel like their seat will be in jeopardy if they decide to go against that lobby. And this is not just the NRA, unfortunately. This is the drug companies, this is the tech companies, this is the fossil fuel companies. So if we're going to pass common sense gun safety laws in this country, we need to actually break the lobbyist stranglehold in our government. And my proposal to do that is to put 100 democracy dollars in the hands of every American around the country that you can give to any candidate or campaign you want each year. Use it or lose it. If we were to do this, we would wash out the lobbyist cash that has overrun our government by a factor of 4 to 1. And then legislators would actually feel free to vote their conscience and what their constituents want. I believe that would help us pass common sense gun safety laws in this country. I also think there's a lot we can do even as we're trying to get those laws passed, because there's a whole string of causes that contribute to gun violence in our communities. We have to face facts that 98% of the shooters we're talking about in the school environments are boys. We have a real boy to men problem in this country. And as the father of an autistic son, I know if you have the wrong boy in the wrong school, very bad things can happen, generally just to that boy and his family, but sometimes something that's external in the community. And too many of our schools don't have appropriate resources for kids who are neurologically atypical or struggling, and they get pushed to the side, particularly boys who are in this position. Right now, the United States Congress funds 15% of special needs education resources for our kids. I want to take that to 100% and get this burden off of communities. I want to invest in a mental health infrastructure. I want to try and decrease the supply of guns in our country through a perpetual evergreen buyback that is in effect. So anytime a gun owner wants to sell a gun, they can just sell it back to the government to try and get the supply down. And then I want to offer every gun owner in the country a complimentary personalization upgrade where only they can fire the gun based upon their palm print and the size of their hand. This way, if the gun gets, let's say, taken by their kid, then it's useless because they can't fire it. And if you're a gun owner, you actually kind of like this personalization upgrade because it makes your gun cooler. It's like a James Bond personalization. You know, like show your friends being like, only I can fire this. But it also makes us all safer. So there are things we need to do to try and attack the gun violence problem at every level, from our families, our schools, our mental health infrastructure, the supply of guns. But you're 100% right. It needs to start at the top. We need to break the stranglehold of the NRA on our legislators and get them to vote along with the will of the American people.
Yeah. Can we talk about, as I'm standing here listening to you, you're being very open about your son with autism. As a parent of a child with autism, how will that inform you as president in terms of policy, in terms of how you conduct yourself, the message that you send to parents and for people who are dealing with autism?
Well, what I say is that special needs and autism are the new normal in our country. How many of you have someone in your family or community with special needs or autism or is neurologically atypical? Look, just about every hand went up. And so we have to stop pretending that there's normal and then there are people in this category of special needs and autistic, because it's the new normal. And I love my son to death. I'm very, very proud of him. I'm not the first presidential candidate to have autism in my family, Don. But for whatever reason, I'm the only one to talk about it openly. And I think that's very, very positive in terms of moving our country in the right direction and being able to support families and communities to a much higher level. Because if you intervene with the right resources at the right stage of development of many of these children, you can actually make a world of difference. And it's the kind of thing where this investment can yield dividends for decades. We should be making those investments in our kids here in this country right now.
Thank you for your candor on that. And I think you're going to help a lot of people. Thank you for that. But you're not going anywhere. We're going to be right back. We're going to take a quick break. More with Andrew Yang right after this.
It's time for the